Great news! There's a quick way you can save money. Switch to Geico. Geico could help you get great coverage at a great price, and it only takes 15 minutes to see if you could save 15% or more on car insurance. Go to geico.com today and see how much you could save.
Caught Offside with Andrew Gunling and JJ Devaney.
Oh, yes! Throwback. Caught Offside from the Upper West Side of Manhattan. Andrew Gunling and JJ Devaney with the beautiful old-school ESPN2 MLS intro. Oh, inspired MLS season.
Inspired by 1980s MacGyver shows.
And when you watch the video of that song playing, you see the whole intro. It's on YouTube. And I love, like, the MLS subliminal messaging where it's just like suddenly in between Alexi Lalas highlights, it fires the word victory at you. And it's just like other positive words. And I love it.
Watch our program.
Hey, what a program this is about to be, because MLS season is upon us. And it is time that all of you get up to speed on everything that's about to occur. I know I am up to speed. Are you?
Oh, absolutely. I'm much more up to speed than the teams we entered into the CONCACAF Champions League.
And now, over the next hour,
they're not ready at all.
We will prove to you just how up to speed we are. Adrian Healey, the voice of MLS on ESPN, is also going to join us to get you set for the season. I believe he's going to be in Seattle for LAFC and the Seattle Sounders, of course. So we'll talk to him coming up. And here's what we're going to do today. For our MLS season preview, we have laid out 5 big questions that we will go through, and we will answer those. So we'll have all of that. Of course, we have a big MLS special mailbag where we took a lot of your questions and comments for the upcoming season. And then we do have a what to watch for, so you know some of the big games coming up. I should say, if you are listening to this podcast solely because you like JJ and I and have no interest in MLS, we will have something for you as well. There's some EPL in the what to watch for, and there's some big stories happening around the world. Neymar, his situation is now becoming clearer and clearer.
We think.
Well, we'll get to that. Yes, want to make sure you stay tuned for that. Also, things are happening with the U.S. World Cup bid for 2026, which are very unnerving and worrisome. We could probably do an entire podcast on just that, but we'll try to at least get in a quick thought and save maybe bulkier thoughts for another day.
Yeah, it's been worrying many of our listeners too.
Yeah. All right, so here we go. You ready for our 5 big questions?
5 large questions that will define the season, and people will look back on and say, hey, those guys got it right.
Starting, I guess we'll count down from 5 to 1. That seems to build some sort of phony anticipation that we will never lead up to.
Oh, no, you've confused me. Don't do that, because it's...
Just go in the order that you have.
All right.
Number 5.
All right.
Which is actually number 1.
Who won the offseason?
I'm going to say Atlanta United won the offseason.
Okay.
They're the club that everyone's talking about in a way is not winning, particularly when you want to keep generating and keep the momentum of last season going. And in signing Ezequiel Barco, they're doing something that it's very hard to say. Other teams are buying young South American players, but this guy was so vaunted, so talked about, and they spent $15 million on him. That's huge. Now, he's injured straight away,
but he'll be back.
Now, Tata Martino has clearly decided that scoring goals is more important than stopping them. And Andrew, as you know, I'm no fan of Darlington Nagbe in a midfield role when you've pretty much jettisoned your other holding midfielder. Despite defensive centre mid and MLS journeyman Jeff Larenowicz and Michael Parkhurst potentially being charged with holding this whole thing together, I think the buzz around Atlanta is deserved, and they won the off-season just by making a splash in the market and keeping the pieces they already had, the Almirons of this world, which excited us. So they've won the off-season for me. The question is whether they can repeat what they did last season and go further.
Well, they kept their pieces with the exception of one big one in Carlos Carmona.
Right, and that's what I'm talking about.
Right.
They just jettisoned from the midfield. And
he wanted to go back with his family in Chile, right?
Don't care about his family in Chile.
Wow.
Of course I do. But the point being is that you've replaced... It's like Rafa Benitez. I asked for a sofa and they gave me a lamp. Mm-hmm. Nagbe is not in the same realm as that guy, and that would be a concern for me because a lot of attacking, as you saw, Andrew, but they can leak goals.
JJ tells us they won the offseason and then proceeds to tell us everything wrong with their offseason. Just fascinating.
No, from one standpoint, they did. The buzz standpoint.
I hear you.
All right. No, you don't.
I don't. Here's mine.
By the way, won the offseason. You are such a clown. That means nothing.
Here's mine. I went with Orlando City. Now, I know they did lose Kyle Larin and Kaká, although I don't know how much the Kaká loss actually hurts them, maybe in jersey sales.
How
but
dare you?
Well, JJ, come on.
I know. If I said that, you'd jump on me and you'd hit me with all his great stats.
Enter Sasha Kljestan, who now comes to Orlando City, who has led MLS in assists, of course, the last 2 seasons. He was top 4 in assists the year before that. Also, they bring him in, and then other moves fly under the radar, even though they shouldn't. Also, enter Justin Miram from Columbus. Kyle Larin had 12 goals last season. Guy that we look at, great striker in MLS. Miram had 13. So, how much of a loss will Larin actually be? Now, Larin did play a few fewer games than Miram, but nevertheless.
Miram's a more skillful player, can create more opportunities for others.
Yeah. Add to that, their designated player usage was interesting. They go for a 19-year-old Paraguayan playmaker, Josue Coleman. They bring in Sporting Lisbon's defensive midfielder, Oriol Rossell, former Werder Bremen center back, and Senegal international Lamine Sané. So they made a few somewhat high-profile additions to the team in addition to the Miram and Kljestan moves. You always talk to me about spine and the importance of that. Sané and Spector at center back. Rossell working the defensive midfield. Kljestan, central playmaking role. Dom Dwyer up front. Seems like a pretty solid spine that they're.
I've seen some projections of teams where Dom Dwyer doesn't even start.
Well, that would surprise me. I'm expecting him to be their starter on opening day.
Well, I believe he's in decline.
Okay, that could be. But as it stands right now, I think as far as a spine goes, that's a pretty good. If you're saying Dom Dwyer's in decline, you're not really going off of something you've seen. You're just projecting, right? I mean, up to this point, he's been a very good player.
Yeah, his numbers last season.
Got a call up to the U.S. men's national team also, so take that. So Orlando is, look, obviously there's questions, but a team that brings in Kljestan, this is a team that hasn't gone to the postseason yet. So I look at these moves and I say, okay, that's certainly enough. I'm not saying they're winning the conference, but I think this is the first year where we finally see them break through and become a playoff team.
I'm going to touch on them later, so I'm not going to say anything else.
Number 4.
All right, who takes a step back this year?
I'm going against conventional wisdom, and I will look to the West and name Seattle Sounders as the team I think is going to take a step back. Firstly, let's get this off the plate first. There is an awful taste in my mouth from that non-performance in the MLS Cup final. To fall flat like that and to put in such a woeful showing was pathetic. And I don't care how good Toronto are, it's a cup final and Seattle could barely get 5 passes together. Dempsey's at a stage where it appears he's not going to give you the kind of consistent production you need. Jordan Morris is injured and probably won't play before the playoffs, if at all, this season.
I'd be stunned if we saw him.
Right, exactly. I don't see Will Bruin replicating his great form in last season's postseason across an entire regular season. If you factor in those 3 players, then you're asking Nicolas Ladero to reset and get back to his early arrival form in Seattle. There's a lot of pressure then put on Christian Roldan to make it all tick from midfield. I just don't see it.
Yeah.
I think this is where we see... Look, postseason aside, were they even that good in the regular season last season? I know they finished second. I never looked at them and thought...
In a very mediocre West. I mean, look, somebody had to finish second. Here, I'll endorse your choice of them by telling you this. I was deciding between them and the team that I ultimately did choose. And we'll stay in the Pacific Northwest for that team. I went with the Portland Timbers, who, remember, finished first. They were They won the Western Conference during the regular season. Lost their manager, Caleb Porter. Lost Darlington Nagbe, who I'd considered probably have been their second best player. I know they still have Fernando Addy. I know, obviously, they still have Diego Valeri, who we think so highly of. A couple solid additions, mainly Andy Polo, who they brought in, who I guess will be... He might just be a direct replacement for what Darlington Nagbe was and the void that he left behind. But here's the thing. Considering the fact that they finished first in the West, like I said, it's a club that found themselves, if you go through their fixture list last season, they had a bunch of convincing losses. Like, they did a lot of things that you wouldn't necessarily expect a team to finish first in their conference to do. Their goal difference last year, again, I know it's just a stat and you can do whatever you want with these, but plus 10 was Portland's goal differential last season. 7 MLS clubs had better goal differences than that. Again, just not something you would expect to see from a number 1 seed going into the postseason. They lost 4 games by 3 goals. They lost to lowly Colorado last season. Just weird things for what's supposed to be a great team. Not saying that they're not a playoff team. Don't get me wrong. That's not what I'm saying. But we're talking about taking a step back. They were first in the West last season. If you're asking me who will be first in the West this season, Portland would not be my answer. So that is why I'm suggesting them as the team that will take a step back. Ready?
Yep.
Number 3.
Which team are you most excited to watch?
I think you're going to hate this. You are just going to hate this because I've twisted this question. I'm going to say NYCFC.
Why? I don't hate that.
You will. This is a massive season for Patrick Vieira and for NYCFC. Vieira getting to another MLS postseason and crashing out early, it just won't cut it, Andrew. The ageing players he had that were imposed upon him are gone, and the players that were making up the numbers as the franchise emerged and got started, they should be gone too. He has had ample time to mould and create the team that he wants, and despite losing Jack Harrison, they've made plenty of signings to create depth. Cedric Hotunji, Ishmael Tajuri, Joe Inge Berget, who is, of course, injured straight away, and yet it still hinges on David Villa. By far the best signing and one of the best signings ever by any MLS team. Should age kick in, niggly injuries abound, although it hasn't so far in his career, NYCFC on paper are in serious trouble. They've signed a striker, we just mentioned him, Berger, who won't make your eyes water in terms of goal scoring and is already injured himself, and I did a scouting report on his brief time at Celtic. Not good. Don't rate their goalkeeper half as highly as everyone else seems to, and while Matarrita is a fine defender, they can still be desperately leaky. This is a team that has got younger, and that's a great thing, but this is still a high-wire act for Vieira, and that's what makes me excited about watching them. They are on the edge.
Oh, yeah. No.
Literally the hamstring of a man in his early 30s is the thread.
I was sad. As an MLS fan, I was sad when I saw Jack Harrison go.
I was sad. I'm more sad now considering his limited minutes for Middlesbrough. He's sitting on the bench at Middlesbrough.
Yeah, it's not what you want. Let's see. My answer for this is probably the one that I would guess the majority of MLS fans, neutral MLS fans, would go with, and that is Atlanta United FC. A very impressive first season. Finished fourth as an expansion team, bowing out to Columbus at home on penalties. But here's the deal. They lost Carlos Carmona, which, of course, is a tough blow to their defensive midfield. And it happened very late on. So up to this point, not really a chance to bring in a direct replacement for him. But 70 goals they scored last season. Second most in all of MLS to just Toronto's 74. And here's where it gets fun. They hung on to Joseph Martinez and Miguel Almiron, as you mentioned, which was not always a given. That was not
for now.
Right. Yeah, I suppose.
When the summer window opens, we got to be worried.
As you mentioned, they acquired Darlington Nagbe from Portland, which was stunning to me. I know you say you're not sure what that will mean for Atlanta, but we're talking about another very talented player entering into a team with other very talented players. That's typically a combination that can be fun to watch. The $15 million transfer for an 18-year-old attacking midfielder, Ezequiel Barco. Yes, I know he's out for 4 to 6 weeks, but what do we always say on this show about MLS? It's a very long season. He'll be back soon enough. You won't even remember that he was ever hurt. They've got the reigning Rookie of the Year in Julian Gressel. Good defensive players in Michael Parkhurst, Greg Garza. Sal Zizzo was brought in. Franco Escobar, a young player, was just brought in. I don't know if he'll be a fullback or a midfield out on the wing. And, of course, Brad Guzan. I don't know what they're going to be defensively. They're not as bad as a lot of people make them out to be. I think they only gave up the fourth fewest goals, I think, is what they gave up last season. And people talk about them like they're a train wreck in defense. I think it's unfair, but it's not their strong suit. They're very good in attack. So if we're talking about a team most fun to watch, you could be looking at a lot of 4-2s, 5-3s, like high-scoring games that Atlanta, because of what they can offer up front, I think that they are box office. So when you see them, plus atmosphere makes up a lot of the sport. And right now, there are a few better than what they're playing in a stadium that if they want to put in 70,000, it seems like they can. So for me, if you see them on ESPN, you stop and you watch.
Absolutely. And they'll be 3-0 up after 25 minutes.
Number 2.
I'm very curious where you go with this. I think this may be our first crossover here. What storyline do you find most compelling coming into the season?
Definitely won't be a crossover. This illustrates how very different we are.
Oh.
It's a tale of two managers for me.
Okay.
Savarese and Kreis. So let me give a personal perspective here. Working on this podcast, I do get the chance to be in the media room and get to see managers up close and personal, and it can be fascinating. Like watching Jesse Marsh from the press box during a game is hilarious. Mm-hmm. Not to say he's not a good manager, but it's hilarious. And I've had the chance to see both Giovanni Savarese and Jason Kreis in New York. And I'm fascinated to see what happens in this massive year for both managers. So Kreis was, I think, treated fairly harshly by NYCFC. And for him to bounce back so quickly, get the Orlando job, is a testament to his perceived powers as a coach. And the consensus is, Andrew, that he has been handed everything he wanted.
That's what I'm saying.
In the off-season.
Yeah.
Right. So maybe not the Kyle Larin drama, obviously, but he has to produce this season. He always cut a kind of a narky, tetchy, slightly dour, always on the defensive stance with NYCFC in front of the New York media. And if he doesn't make Orlando legit contenders this season, you're going to see that all over again. And they need to be good right now. And Savarese is interesting too, because he was the opposite at New York Cosmos. He won and won big. And even in more challenging times like last season, he always seemed like he loved what he was doing and capable of getting the best out of his players, which is basically the two most important things a manager needs to be able to do. Now he's in the quote-unquote big time with a team that's been successful recently and is pretty much always in the conversation. I mean,